Okay, so you didn't get the ACT score that you wanted. Here's what we're gonna do next. So first things first here, we just have to know it's not the end of the world just because you didn't get your target score. And I've seen it countless times where students are stuck at the same score, sometimes even getting a lower score on a test, like 2, 3, even 4 tests in a row, before they finally just make a little tweak to their approach. Maybe they revamp their study schedule or their approach to preparing for the ACT, and all of a sudden that one little tweak or their change to the study schedule can take their scores up 3, 4, even 5 extra ACT points from wherever they were plateaued. So the key here is just don't beat yourself up. There's another test coming up, and just because you didn't improve your score or you didn't get the target score you wanted, that does not mean you're stuck there forever. There are definitely ways that we can make little improvements to your approach and get you as close to your target score as possible. And now the first part of this process is going to be somewhat of a post-mortem. We need to figure out what you did wrong going into the last test so we don't make the same mistake in our preparation for this next test. Now this is why it's important to always start your preparation with some sort of a benchmark score or some sort of a diagnostic test. This is how we are going to actually measure our improvement or our lack of improvement if that's what you were disappointed about. So if you didn't have a benchmark score or a diagnostic score going into this test, there's no way to track whether you actually made any improvement or not. Just because you didn't reach your target score doesn't necessarily mean you didn't improve at all. And unfortunately, if you didn't do it going into this last test, we're kind of out of luck because we can't go back and see where you started. But now at least we do have a benchmark score going into your next test. So let's assume that you do have a benchmark starting score for each section of the test. We'll want to compare each section of that diagnostic test or that benchmark score with the section of the test that you just got back that you're not too happy with. For example, we'll look at the English section first, compare diagnostic English with most recent ACT English. What we're going to want to do with each one of these sections is see how much improvement we made or how much improvement we didn't make. If we improved by 3 points or more, then I'd say that's actually a really good improvement. You could probably stick with whatever process you went through for the preparation for that specific section. Now the problem comes in if we didn't actually improve by 3 points or more. So let's say we only had a 1 or a 2 point score improvement from benchmark to a real test, or let's say we even went down in score. That's where we're really gonna need to reevaluate what our process was to study for that section. So ask yourself and really be honest, what did you do to prepare? Now I have a full video outlining exactly what I think the best way to prepare is, but I'll go ahead and I'll outline some of the key steps in that process. Basically, you need to take practice tests with real ACT practice questions and then review them to see where your weak areas are. And then we need to practice specifically on those weak areas. Now, the biggest mistake that I see students make here is students hear this practice test thing and review their answers, and they completely ignore the second part of that, and they just focus on the first part. All they want to do is just take practice tests over and over again because they think, oh, I'm just going to take practice tests, I'm going to recognize the questions, and all of a sudden my score will go up. That's a huge mistake. We can't just have one piece of the puzzle without having the other one. We have to take practice tests and we have to review our answers in detail so that we can actually make the improvements on the test. So basically, first things first, as soon as you finish a practice test, you should go through, look through all of those incorrect answers. And again, any one that we circled or that we were unsure of. And before you even consult any outside resources, you should use the answer key for that test to try and figure out why the right answer is the right answer. So let's say you put B on an answer and it was wrong and the correct answer was actually D. What we would want to do is not actually look at like your tutor helping you out or not look at your Khan Academy videos or anything like that. Try and see if you can understand why the correct answer was D. See if you can reverse engineer the thought process to getting from the beginning, whatever the question was asking, to the correct answer. You know what the correct answer is because you have the answer key. So just see if you can figure out why that is. Going through this process of trying to solve the question on your own with the answer key there can really help you understand why you're making certain mistakes. And it's a much better way of teaching yourself how to go through the learning process. If you just have the information spoon-fed to you and it's nice and easy and you don't really have to make those new connections in your brain, you don't really have to think, you're just getting the information spoon-fed to you, you're not actually learning anything. Now, if you're trying to reverse engineer the answer choice and you just can't seem to get there for whatever reason, after a couple minutes of really powering through trying to think about it, that's when we can go to our other resources. That's where we use Google, we use Khan Academy, you use your tutor, you check out some of my videos on some of the problems that I've talked about, and that's where we get the explanation. But our review process does not stop there. If we know that we're struggling with this type of question because we just missed it, we shouldn't just solve it the correct way and then kind of move on from that. What we need to do is practice with these same types of questions over and over again until we can confidently go through the process of solving one of these questions from start to finish without the resources like there to guide us. So what you want to do is, if you have a question bank of question types, then go through the process of solving these exact same types of questions. Not the exact same question, but the exact same type of question. So to make this a little bit more concrete, let's say you missed a SOHCAHTOA question, a right triangle question where it gave you the sine or the cosine, and we had to figure out the side lengths. Go through the process of fixing your incorrect answer, using your notes or using your resources out there if you have to. But then once you review that question that you got wrong on the test, what you should do is find 5 or 6 similar questions that you haven't seen before that are also SOHCAHTOA questions. Start by solving those questions with your notes if you have to. And then once you get a little bit more comfortable, make sure that you can solve those questions from the start without using any extra resources, without using your notes, without using any assistance. And that's how we teach our brain to solve new types of problems. If we don't actually go through this process, we're not learning anything. If you just review the answers and it's like, oh, I got this one wrong, I guess I'll just get this one right next time, that's not how you actually make any improvements. You have to go through the process of understanding why you missed it, solving it again on a practice question where you don't have the resources in front of you. And then that's when we're gonna actually be able to solve these things the next time we see them on a practice test, and then again on the real ACT. This review process sounds pretty intense, and that's where I think it scares a lot of people off. A lot of students just want to take their practice test and then that's it. They just want to take their practice test and be done. But we should be spending probably 2 to 3 times as long reviewing our practice tests and going through that process of solving similar questions as we are actually taking the practice test itself. So if you spend an hour on a math practice test because it's 60 minutes, then we should probably be spending at least 2 or 3 hours reviewing that practice test and drilling those concepts in. So I recently heard a great definition of what learning actually is. And this is from Alex Hormozy, so credit to him. But he says that learning is when you're presented with the same set of conditions and you respond differently. If you see a red card and somebody slaps you, and then the next time you duck, you've learned something. If after the first time you still don't duck, you haven't learned anything. That's the example that he gives. I may have done that analogy a bit of a disservice, so sorry to him if that's the case. But I think the same definition applies to the ACT. If you get a practice question wrong and you don't make any changes and you see a similar practice question the next time and you answer it in the same way, then you didn't actually learn anything. So if you take a practice test and you miss a SOHCAHTOA question because you thought that sine was opposite over adjacent or something like that, and you didn't realize that sine is actually opposite over hypotenuse, and then you don't review that and you go into another practice test and you see another right triangle SOHCAHTOA question and you still respond in the same way, thinking that sine is opposite over adjacent, then you really haven't learned anything. And that's where we really need to go through the process of reviewing our answers and looking at similar practice questions until we can solve those ones correctly on our own without any help. That's how we go through the process of learning and making sure that the next time we see the same question, the next time we see the same stimulus, we respond differently. If I hold up a red card, you duck. If I ask you a question about SOHCAHTOA, you know that sine is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. So recapping the process of learning on the ACT, we cannot just follow one part of this process like a lot of students want to. We need all of these parts. First off, we should have a benchmark test so that we know and we can track our progress over time. Second, we need to review and categorize our misses as certain types of questions. Again, I use the example of SOHCAHTOA questions, but it could be semicolons, colons, I guess I already said right triangle, but it could be area of a triangle, it could be algebra, multiple equations, whatever it is. Categorize your misses and learn what they are. And then third thing up, we need to repair our mistakes. So you identify what the mistake is, and then you repair it by going through the process of first trying to reverse engineer through the answer key what the right process is. And then if you can't do that, that's where we use our other resources, Google, Khan Academy, my videos, little shout out, of course. And then we use similar practice questions to what we just missed to make sure that we can do these questions on our own with no help. And then the fourth thing up is we need to practice on similar question types without the resources to make sure that we can do it on our own, so that when we get to the next practice test, we're not making the same mistakes. We're now adjusting, we're seeing the same stimulus and we're having a new response, which means that we've actually done learning. So that is the process of learning on the ACT. Now, here are a couple of things that I see throwing people off from this learning. And one of these things is students not just following one plan. Students are just trying to take input from all different places. They're getting told what to do by their dad. They're getting told what to do by their friends who's maybe scored better, maybe didn't even score better on the ACT, and they're still listening to them. They're trying to take input from their teachers on how to approach the test. And then they have like 3 different tutors that they're trying to listen to all at the same time. What we have to do is follow one plan from one person. Otherwise, we're gonna get pulled in all different directions and we're gonna make absolutely no progress. For example, if you're trying to bake a cake, you have to stick to one recipe and follow that one recipe. You can't just follow 6 different recipes and take one little piece of this recipe, one little piece of that recipe, and then try and blend them all together, or else you'll end up with a really bad tasting cake. And similarly, if you try and take one piece of information from your math teacher, and then your dad tries to tell you something else, and then your math tutor tries to tell you a third thing, then you're gonna end up with a really bad ACT score. So basically, pick one plan and stick with it. And if that one plan doesn't work for you on this test, then you have to kind of reevaluate. Maybe you pick a different plan and listen to somebody else. But at the end of the day, picking and testing one plan is the only way that you're going to even know which plan works and which plan doesn't work. And then one of the other things that I see throwing people off all the time is that improvement on the ACT only comes when you prioritize the ACT over everything else. Now, I know high school students have a ton of time commitments, but you need to be focused in what you're doing. If it's time for you to prepare for the ACT, it's time for you to prepare for the ACT. A lot of times we should really just be putting aside like our extracurriculars that you're not too passionate about. So if that's the sport that you're not too interested in or the club that you're not too interested in, if you're not really passionate about what you're doing outside of the classroom, then we need to be pushing those commitments off to the side and really evaluating where we're spending our time. You simply cannot have everything from sports, clubs, homework, friends, school, and ACT prep going on at the same time, because again, you're spreading yourself too thin and that ACT prep will just not be nearly as effective. And then you're gonna end up thinking that you just can't get a better score on the ACT, when in reality, if you were to focus your time into one area, specifically in this case, the ACT, you could actually make significant improvement on the ACT. And then once you're done with the ACT, that's when you can really pick back up on all of the other things, the extracurriculars, the clubs that you may or may not be interested in, all of those things. So this is where you really need to look and plan out your calendar. If you know it's the baseball season and you know you're not gonna be able to focus on ACT prep during baseball season, then pick a time when you are gonna be able to focus on ACT prep. And that is where you really need to lay out your study schedule. So you really need to look at your annual calendar and figure out a time when you can pick ACT over everything else, make that a priority and just go full steam ahead on the ACT. If you know that it's baseball season in the spring and you're committed to playing baseball all spring long, then we probably shouldn't be trying to prep for the ACT in the spring. This is where we need to plan very far ahead. So maybe you're not playing summer baseball. We pick a plan in the summer and we say, okay, this is gonna be the outline. We're gonna start in June and we're gonna pick up with this preparation program and we're gonna do X number of hours of studying every day over the summer. And then we're gonna lead into that July ACT and we're gonna be very well prepared for that. We wouldn't want to try and just haphazardly throw in some ACT preparation in the middle of the spring baseball season, because then we're just gonna, again, be spreading ourselves too thin and we're gonna distract from our baseball and we're not even gonna really pick anything up from the ACT preparation. So again, we need to be very focused and determined and go full steam ahead at one point in time on ACT preparation. Now, of course, I'm a little bit biased here because I'm an ACT coach, but I think that the ACT is the most important single factor in your college resume. Of course, I think high school GPA is really important and all that stuff, but the high school GPA in all your classes is 4 years of commitment, whereas the ACT is something that we can commit to maybe a month or month and a half of preparation and have almost the same impact as the entire 4 years of your high school career. So if we can focus in on the ACT for just a couple of weeks, dedicate ourselves fully to this test, I think that that's the best return on time investment that you're ever gonna get. So that's my pitch for you picking a time and going full steam ahead on the ACT. So there you have it. if you didn't get the score that you wanted, you need to take a look back at your process that you kind of went through leading up to that test. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So if you didn't get a great result on this last test, we should probably not do the same thing that we did leading into this last test, right? Because that would be the definition of insanity, and we don't want to be insane people. So I just gave you a couple of really great tips for laying out your own path to improving the next time you take the ACT. But if you want me personally to make sure that your student gets on the right path and follows it all the way until the path is completed, then go ahead and click the link below. It should be in the description of this video, and you can apply for a call with me to see if we are a good fit to work together. Otherwise, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more information on how to master the ACT and earn a ton of scholarship money by doing so.